Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. What is the process, by the way, for doing whatever that magic thing is that you always do? Is that just a leader login or something, or log out and log back in? Or?
So under the participants, there's a claim host button, and then you just put in the host key.
Oh, okay.
Got it. Okay, so combing the issues here. We have this first one is yours, Jay. Do you want to talk about this issue and whether or not we need to take any action on it, or if you need help on this?
Which one is that? Let's see. Okay.
Sorry, brainstorming a CRD.
So this goes to the syntactic sugar thing that Dan and Chris were just talking about. But this would be like an extreme version of it. And I don't think anybody else is particularly interested in this other than me. So I'm not going to ask for help. But if anybody is interested in looking at like what would be the ideal way to express these things if we didn't have any baggage of the past, that's kind of something that I've been playing around with.
By the way, Jay, I don't know if you granted McCodeman, that's my GitHub ID, access to this repo. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to take any actions or assign anything during this call. So
I think I did, but maybe it's waiting for you to accept it, but I'll do it again just to make sure.
That might be the case. That very well may be the case. If that's the case, that's my own bad. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's Monday, Cody.
Oh, it's all kinds of Monday today. We're in the middle of conference season where I'm at, and in the middle of a product launch at the same time, so it's been fun.
Okay. Yeah, and I just checked. It's all your fault.
That's all my fault. Okay.
You have to accept the response. Okay. But yeah, if anybody's interested in the CRD stuff, it's a really hard problem. Like, so Matt, I don't want to take up all the time, but I'll just, for 30 seconds, Matt Fenwick has really, really dove in and tried to build this sort of like a higher level operator that would, at a very, very high level, use a traffic abstraction. And he was looking at it and he was hitting some sharp corners in the APIs around the defaults and stuff that was making it tricky for him to build it properly. But he's been thinking a lot about this too. And we're still just kind of trying to wrap our head around it. And so if anybody wants to talk about that, that's great. Otherwise, I'll just keep exploring it on my own.
So Jay, as you know, I'm interested in the CRD aspects. But also I thought one of the things that we were going to discuss today was taking a step back and looking at the proposal. So I pushed a PR for that. And this is basically building on top of what Dan's initial thought process was on his Google Doc. So it's kind of like building on top of it. I think one of the things that he, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, that he was looking for some sort of a security model, like an abstract model, which if we all agree upon that kind of a security model makes sense for a Kubernetes cluster, then we kind of scope out the roles for the admins and the developer, and then we kind of build on top of it and figure how to implement or design those ideas. So that's why I was not really deep diving into the CRD concept directly, because that's like implementation or some sort of a design, but taking a step back and figuring out whether this security model works for the Kubernetes clusters or what we are trying to dev. And that's why I thought Dan's doc was pretty good in that respect. And I felt like it kind of got lost between this move to the KEPs. I don't know if Dan, I think you're on the call, so do you agree or?
I mean, yeah, I think there's danger that if people rush into just doing stuff, then we're more likely to end up with stuff that doesn't actually fit and isn't adopted by the community. But if we get KEPs out soon, then that's the point of KEPs, is to figure out whether the community supports it and whether it makes sense. So, if people are going to, if this gets us KEPs more quickly than coming up with a grand unified model first, then maybe this is useful.
So whenever we get a chance, maybe we can just go through that PR also, and then we'll probably also I'll help Jay work on the CRD aspect with you.
So yeah. I mean, I think the CRD aspect is by far the most likely to be totally useless of all the things we're doing.
But I feel like you mentioned that the CRD and then there's an operator backing the CRD. So I think that those are two separate things. One is an implementation of the CRD, and one is just defining that or designing that CRD. So I wasn't sure whether you and Matt were already working on the operator part and you have a CRD, or whether this is something that you want to talk about on the API level.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think we're very far from an API level conversation. I think Dan's doc needs to be, I think that Dan's doc is probably the best use of your time, because I think it's going to converge with other stuff, right? I mean, it seems to me like that, Abhishek, like, so whatever. I mean, I think, does anybody have a strong feeling about whether doing these things in parallel is beneficial in any way? That's the basic hypothesis, is that some of these things will fail and some will succeed, but they will all eventually converge. But does anyone feel like any of these efforts are actually negative, like going to lead us in two different directions in a way that's dangerous? I think that's the bigger question, right? Because if not, then I don't have any particular concerns, but I guess that's the thing, right?
I don't think anyone really cares about what anyone else works on in parallel. I guess the important thing, though, is making sure that we review the things we think that are ready to go, or that we think are ready to be brought for discussion. Because there's always going to be experiments and things that happen.
Yeah, so let me rephrase my question, Jay. I think I wanted to ask was the issue that you have, the brainstorming CRD. Is it like brainstorming the API for that CRD, like how to format that CRD, like what fields to include, or is it something that you already have an implementation? Because I think you mentioned that Matt already has some sort of operator which works upon. So it was more like, whether, how, in what area do you need help?
Oh, yeah. It's not even well formed enough to say there, right? Like it could be either. It's just like, what other ways can we express this stuff? And either one of those could we have something that sort of works, and that's an operator, and that's one thing, and then that's one thing that we possibly could use help with. But then the other thing is an actual CRD that might be a slightly better version of this V2 policy is another thing we might think about. But why don't you just sync up with me offline about it, because it's totally up in the air, right?
Yeah.
As you all know, it's a very tricky problem, right, to figure this stuff out, because there's just a lot of moving parts as far as what should be in the API and what is just a CRD and all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So that's why I still think that the going back to Dan's doc is super useful, and I think that that's like, having that as another way that converges us. Like if within a month from now we can say we've got an implementation of Dan's doc that's like a unified security model, and we've got, oh, by the way, we've also got 75% of a couple of things that are KEPs that fit in to very tactical aspects of that. If we've got all that sort of starting to converge together, I think that's great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I took a stab at that by kind of like translating his doc to a PR or something in this repo, and then maybe we can build on top of it as well. but I forgot to raise an issue for it. So maybe we can.
Yeah, no, let's merge that, and then I'll help you iterate on that as well. And Dan, if you want to give us some feedback on that also, or anybody else, that would be great. Because I think we're definitely missing that now that we're like going cart before the horse now, you know.
I have a question on this CRD thing, right? Are we going to do narrow policy v2 directly, which means it's not backward compatible, or we're going to do an enhanced version of v1? Because, I mean, this direction definitely affects how you define the CRD, right?
Yeah, and that is the reason why I kind of like, alluded to taking a step back and figuring out the model and then see what makes more sense. Especially for the developer focused APIs, I think there are two ways to handle it. One is, we accept what we have because, it is something that works, the V1 APIs, and we only decide to go forward with the generative fields that we can add without any, disruption to or without any backwards incompatibility. Or we just decide that, we deprecate this and we move on to the new V2 model, V2 set of APIs. But I guess I think the broader group kind of agrees that we can do this in a parallel sense and see which one gets more traction and what is more relevant, I guess.
Well, and Dan's original doc actually has both of the approaches that Zhang mentioned, right? So that was part of it, right? Is that we're going to have two proposals, one that's less disruptive and one that's more, right? I think.
Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to convey.
Oh, okay. But on the other hand, even if we have two proposals in parallel, we want them to have something common, right? Basically, like the functionality covered by one of them should be included in the other, like the backward compatibility ones, all right? I mean, the functionalities you added for the backward compatibility ones should have their position in your new, like brand new V2 proposal as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think I forgot the details, but I think that was in there, right? I would check.
Okay, then are we going to discuss these two things in parallel here, or what? I mean, which one are this meeting is going to focus on?
So I think the first thing we need to do is there are action items or issues already devoted to this, to both sets of issues, right? I'm sorry, both sets of courses of action here, both the CRD approach and continuing to finalize the caps. So I think we can do both.
Okay, I'm not sure if that would make this effort to be distracted or not. If we're doing both, like for example, like today, I was thinking that, initially I thought we were going to discuss the issue of 30, which is to say, okay, what do we want to propose in this starter cap? Which, since it's a starter cap, most likely it's a backward compatible one, or not. What does that starter cap means then?
So I'm not help me understand the conflict here.
What do you mean? I'm just wondering, like, which one we are going to discuss. I mean, if we're doing parallel, so what are we going to discuss now? I thought that we are thinking that we go one cap. I mean, either direction, either it's enhancement or it's a new one. But
oh, I see. I think I see what you're saying now. So I think what Jay is proposing is, and Abhishek as well, is, I think we can move forward towards coming up with a unified security model at the same time that we're trying to flesh out some of the specific caps. Is that right, Jay? That's the parallel piece that I'm thinking about.
I was thinking, so my thought, and I could be wrong about this, but so Zhang, my thinking here is that some of the things we may try might fail, and that's kind of okay. So I guess is there anything in particular that you'd be interested in kind of owning or helping with of these approaches? Because I guess that's kind of the driver here, is that people can,
Right.
we're going to make success. We're going to be more successful if people individually help take ownership of some things. And the consequence of that is that the meetings are going to be a little more chaotic, and we're going to potentially be working on things that intersect in different ways.
Yeah, sure. Jane, I'm just trying to understand the focus here. Maybe because I wasn't focused on this for a long time, so I kind of want to know what's the current focus. Like, what's the way to moving forward here? Like, it looks to me that there's many paths in front of us. We got to choose one to go, right?
We could, yes, we could choose one to go.
Or we are still deciding which way to go. Oh.
I think we're still deciding. If possible, can we return to like the original KEPs that we had? Like, I think what we're trying to do is, at least what I thought we were going to do this meeting is, we had 3 ideas on potential things that we could make KEPs out of. Do we still want to discuss the 2 remaining ones? Because I personally haven't seen anything that we've discussed that seems like a breaking change that we would even think about putting in a CRD or V2 at the moment. Does anyone else know of any?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, great, yeah.
And then Zing, if you want to sync up offline sometime this week also, like, we could talk more about what your concerns are for sure, right?
Sure, yeah. Okay, maybe I misunderstood the stage right now. We're still deciding what to be included in a CAP, in a initial CAP.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I mean, the overall goal is to just get people more engaged, and as opposed to like having a perfect vision for the future. And so we're kind of leaning towards engagement, which is leading to a little bit of chaos, right?
Sure, understood. Thanks a lot.
So I agree with Chris that I think the best use of the next 25 minutes might be just talking about issue 30. What do folks think?
I'm on it.
Sure.
So is somebody going to drive the actual? Yeah, we do have a repo.
Where is it linked?
It should be linked to the agenda document, is it not? Let me check.
I put it in the Zoom call, but I'll also put it on the doc if it's not. And yeah,
it's under user stories. It says temporary repo for KEPs on the network policy ++ sub project agenda. I'll show you.
I see it. Thank you.
Okay. So, Christopher, back to you. You said there were 3 specific user stories we're talking about implementing. Have we tagged those as issues, or have we identified those somehow in the KEPs that are in draft so that we can know what those 3 are?
They're not captured in like so the issue 30 that is posted in the chat there.
Okay.
I personally haven't implemented any KEPs just because I was hoping to get more feedback on if we think these are valid ideas first.
Yeah, I think what Chris and Ricardo were proposing is, let's get a list of all the non-disruptive or backwards compatible, like incremental APIs changes we can make to V1. And if we can get quorum or consensus on this call, then we can start creating issues to track work to put these into KEPs. Is my understanding there correct, Ricardo? Chris?
Yes, exactly. We got that from Dan's doc. I don't know if everybody knows this one, but this is, thank you very much about that, Dan, because that's a really better organized than me. So there is a categorization of existing use cases, and the item 1 is the plausible network policy additions. So we started to discuss whether what of those plausible network policy additions can already be turned into a CAP. So I've asked about the port ranges. Jay asked about the matching namespace by name, but we know that there is a disagreement about from team about using names instead of labels, and then Chris also got the one from the named CDR blocks IP set. So the proposal here is, can we start working in something that is, it's not disruptive for the V1 network policy? Can we start writing the CAP even if it's not implementable yet, and then like ask for SIG network what they think about that? Because this is much more like the app protocol CAP that Rob Scott proposed for the cloud providers, was adding just a field into service. So my question is this also just a CAP that is adding a field into network policy, or is this something going to break some, or is this CAP going to break something? How can we work with that?
So this, we talked about the cider slices one, and I think that's the one where, as I mentioned, this is probably already doable by just creating multiple peers. We don't have to go as granular down to the cider field as it exists today. The other one is nodes. I posted an issue in the, let me just posted it in the Zoom chat in case anyone joins a little later. I put it in our notes for today for node selector.
So for the node selector one,
yep,
is node selector just saying, I want to select a bunch of addresses based on like the internal, external IPs that we set on nodes, and then use those in the network policy rules? Like in terms of like the data path, it's just like pod IPs, but we're just putting in node IPs. Is that what it is?
This is where, yeah, there's a bit of confusion. If we take a look at how others have implemented node selectors in their CRDs for their individual CNI, for example, we have, I found in Cilium, they do a node selector in combination almost with endpoint selector. And I'll post that note in the Zoom chat.
When you say node, do you mean specific Kubernetes cluster node, or do you mean just a node generically as a IP endpoint?
Good question. Because in theirs, they're doing this based on a node within the selector or within the cluster based on a label. But they also talk about endpoints existing potentially on those nodes. Let's correlate with kind of a group of things. I was trying to figure out what the use case for this would be. Like if you had a bunch of, I think Ricardo mentioned, maybe you have a selection of nodes that are for your sensitive applications or something, and you deploy a bunch of pods to those nodes specifically. And then you just wanted to say, okay, I know that everything on secret nodes may belong to a bunch of pods or whatnot, but I just want to refer to them as one thing. I would create maybe a node selector for that. And then that would be my rule for saying block all access to these nodes unless specifically allowed. So this would be adding node selector to the to or from peer sets. Does anyone have any opinions on that?
So I think if it's node, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I had thought that like there was some discussion about exactly what it meant, but I thought that the proposer of the original thing meant for it to be for selecting node IPs, so that, for instance, you could say, I want these host network pods to be able to access this pod and select traffic from those node IPs, basically, by using names. Not for selecting pods on a node.
Yeah, agreed. I thought that's what it was too. And if we're saying that we do want the node selector to be all pods on nodes, then I think the change is a bit more disruptive and not something that we can incrementally add. But if it's just the node IPs, which I think that's what we want to start with, right?
No, I think that was the original intent, was the node IPs. But I think that it was a node when we originally talked about it, it was a node specific selector, I thought, in terms of Kubernetes node, right? We wanted a way to say I want to be able to use the metadata of Kubernetes node objects to select traffic coming from those specific hosts, and not the pods that are hosted on those hosts, just the traffic that is using the host default, network interface.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. But can we
Agreed.
maybe there needs to be
Let's
more
make
words
let's make
to
sure we
clarify
have
that.
let's make sure we have the user story created for that, because I don't think
it's
we
in
have
there.
a file
Yeah,
in here yet.
we
Yeah,
have.
so let's
We have that. I
add
want
that.
Yeah, that's a node selector. Take a look. The third from bottom to.
Oh, it is there. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I think it is there.
Except that I don't think we put this in the P0 one, so I'll do that. I'll add that now. I'll make sure this is in there somewhere.
Yeah, we do
Yeah,
have this one here.
We just to clarify, Jay, this one appeared for us as a P0 because we were discussing about what's the impact of having a services selector, and we discussed about what's the impact about having like services selector or node selector or whatever object selector, and we put that into having new selectors for services for nodes, but we can already discuss if this is like a P0 or if
Well,
this is harder than it looks like.
wait, how is it missing from P0 user stories.md? How did this get in the sub detail thing without being in there?
Because we were discussing about services selector, and you asked me like, okay, but what's the difference between having a services selector or a node selector? Remember?
Oh yeah,
So
but
I don't know. We can have both of them and like see what happens.
oh yeah, no that. But in this case, I mean, this is one of Cody. I guess this is one of yours. We need to link this to one of the high-level user stories, but I don't think it's linked, right?
Okay. Let me put an action to do that.
Should we just do that right now since it's kind of this main subject of the?
We could, but I don't want to. Yeah, we can.
I mean, because that way we can get folks to make sure we put it in the right
I guess I could just edit the file in place here.
Yeah, let's just edit it, yeah. Otherwise, we're just going to have a bunch of issues.
Get the
And that'll help drive whoever wants to flesh this out more.
So to confirm, what would be the node selector type? Would it still be a label on a given node, or would it be an arbitrary IP?
wrong file.
Label on a node, I think. I think I think we're saying the label selector selects node objects, and then we're using those IPs. I think there's another question of like, which address types do we select against? So like, is it internal IP, external IP, whatever? But that seems like possibly an implementation detail for later.
How do we?
I guess that's where, so in the KEP would probably be like, what would the implementer have to do really to support this? And what happens if node selector is one-to-one with an actual Kubernetes node, correct? Not just an arbitrary, like an external name or anything like that?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, node selectors, yeah, it's going to be its own object. And it'll be another option added to policy, right? You'll be able to put a node selector rather than a pod selector.
So I guess this is, I want all of the host port traffic on one node to, but I have several pods that I don't want them to be able to. I want a group of pods to not be able to access host networked pods on a given node. Is that the user story? Or a valid user story for this?
Or you want also to select an egress only for specific node IPs and node ports? Like I wanna reach only those nodes into that node IPs.
Yeah, I mean, it's all node traffic, right? I mean, it's all host traffic on that Kubernetes node.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah,
Thanks,
but
Cody. I just wanted to make sure we didn't forget to add that.
Yeah, but I think we need to be careful with the wording for host traffic, because it might imply that we're saying traffic that goes from like 2 pods through the node would also get blocked. But I think
Yeah.
we're only saying, yeah, against like the node IPs, if the destination or source is the node IPs.
Yeah, that's really
So-
confusing. You're right. I was so
Well-
confused about that.
So we can update the terminology. Basically, when we talk about host traffic, it means the IP address that the processes on that host are using, right, to do traffic. If
If you say
the
I want
challenge
to,
here is,
go ahead.
oh, well, I was going to say, if you're talking about pod traffic, right? Pod traffic is not SNATed against the node IP address unless it's going external, right? And so at that point, it would be captured. Anything that gets SNATed would be captured. So we would have to have an option in there not to capture SNATed traffic.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The SNATing should happen after network policy is enforced anyway, you'd think.
Yeah, because it's addressed.
Possibly. It all depends on how you want to do that. So Calico actually has some interesting parameters that it handles evaluation of policy, either pre-DNAT or post-DNAT, some of those types of things. And so it's a similar type of thing going on. So I'm just going to put a note in here that we need to, do we need parameters? All right, so we've got one of them captured. Who's going to own this story?
Jay asked me to try to own that. I'm probably going to own the port range one. So if someone can help me, otherwise I can own this one also.
I mean, I work with Andrew, and he knows he's got some thoughts on this for sure, and also I can reach out to other people that care about it and try to integrate the signals to get good consensus on what folks think is a reasonable.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is
So I can definitely own it, like to start for sure. I think I'm going to poke, of course, Andrew, Dan, and anyone else who's interested in helping me own it. But feel free to flag me as an owner to start.
Cool. So while Cody does that, I actually did want to propose 2 more things to Ricardo's issue for like good starter keps. I think namespace by names is actually pretty useful. I know Tim disagreed on that one, but I think it'd be pretty low hanging fruit as long as we have validation in the API to ensure that you can't set both namespace by names and by selector. And the second one I'd want to propose is cluster scoped network policies, because that would be a new resource,
Object.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be a new object, so it'd be completely decoupled and wouldn't be breaking anything in V1. What do folks think?
Definitely namespace by name. We were just talking about that earlier today, about whether we should propose that. But
It's
Go ahead and add that as a comment, if you will, to the list or to that issue that we were looking at.
yeah, I'll edit it. That bullet is a running list, so I'll edit it.
Thank you.
For the namespace by name thing, I know we've talked about this quite a lot. Is the worry on that, like if you are able to, are you able with RBAC to say you're not able to read labels on namespaces?
RBAC doesn't do anything with fields. It's only at the level of objects. Well, I mean, you can probably distinguish status from top level, but you can't do things like you can look at the labels, but nothing else or anything like that.
Yeah, so if you can write the object, then you can write the labels. If you can read the object, you can read the labels, right?
So being able to see, like if being able to see all of the labels on the namespace is not something that you can lock down? Or is it?
You can make it so they can't see the namespace.
So Andrew, we already have the name as policy target, by the way.
Okay, is that
on that P0 list? So we just need an owner for that, or?
I think this should specifically be namespace name. There's much less of an argument for doing it with any other resource type.
Yeah, agreed. Because this is name as a policy target for generic. Like I think we were talking about like pods and services and whatever, but I was specifically proposing just namespaces.
And two comments on this.
So you're saying this story is too wide?
Yes, but
So maybe
but one thing to know, like I noticed these are P0s, but I thought we're only talking about like keps that are like low friction changes to V1. So I don't know if we want a separate category for that. Because I don't want to say that name as policy target is not a P0, but it's definitely not P0 for like incremental additions to V1.
Yeah.
Understood. So what we could say is like as a V1 incremental, let's say V1 incremental addition.
Yeah, that's why we didn't bring it up. We were thinking the same thing. It's going to be high friction, so let's not start with something given the monumental nature of this.
Yeah.
That's not easy. I'm going to remove that.
Yeah, but if we're talking just namespace, I think it would fit into what Ricardo was saying earlier.
As selector for as predicate for namespace selector. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think it's still going to be high friction because we know Tim doesn't want it, right? Like.
Well, that's okay.
Okay.
Well, that's why we're gonna.
I think we can convince
write
him.
all the reasons that we want it. Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's high friction until you describe what you want.
Or until you do it, right? Okay.
I had two comments on this. This particular one is that to make it a little less friction, it might be more useful for this use case in the cluster scope policy. Namespace is a name, and the other one was that if we do plan to introduce node selector, maybe nodes as name would also probably make sense. So we don't have to write that down as of now.
Who's going to own this?
You can add
a second. Yeah.
I see.
Cluster network policy. Or
So we've got let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got about 15, 16 people here. Does anybody want to own this story?
You can add my name on this.
Okay.
Is that you, Abhishek?
Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else want to help Abhishek on it?
Sorry, does the scope here include cluster network policy? I'm trying to understand if that's the intent here.
The scope here does not. That would be a link. But basically what Abhishek is saying is if we create a administrative, network policy that's cluster scoped in nature, right? Which I just named it cluster network policy. We may name it something different, but including this option only there, since that's a net new object or net new resource, might have less friction than changing to standard network policy.
Understood. Okay.
And also keep in mind, I mean, part of this is just exploring what we can do here, right, Govind? So maybe that, the
Yeah.
answer, that's part of it. So.
Yeah.
Is that you sort of volunteering to help Abhishek on this?
I really want to work on cluster number policy. I'm personally very biased on that.
Okay. Okay.
All right, let's go to that. I'm going to add both you and Abhishek on that because I think he's also pretty passionate about that as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I don't know if we've, as a group, come up with anything collectively for that, do we? Maybe we do. I guess we do. That might be, Abhishek, maybe Govind could help you on the doc that you're making with Dan. That's a perfect thing, right? Because that's exactly where that's all going to fit in.
Okay, who was the first person that spoke up that wanted to own that?
Govind.
There is also Andrew. Andrew, do you want to go through this one?
I'm okay.
Who else?
No, you can add me for this story as well. This is Young speaking.
Sure.
So Abhishek, I guess you're going to have to coordinate some of that work with those.
Yeah, I'll raise and I'll talk to the guys.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Excellent.
The only story that is missing, Cody, is the port range. I'm gonna write that probably this week and assign myself as owner. Okay.
All right. Is there a task for that?
Yeah, that's probably better.
We got to clean up some of these issues too, so that we can really start tracking the stuff that we need.
Yeah, we've only got a couple minutes left today, but I think
I'll clean them. I'll triage them with you later, Cody.
you and I need to triage through them. Yeah.
Do you just want to do it after this call? Do you have like 15 minutes?
I literally am booked to meetings until 7 p.m. your time, but we could do it. I do have time tomorrow morning.
Let's do it in the morning. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. And who said they were going to do the port range? I'm sorry. Was that Ricardo or somebody else?
Ricardo.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's Ricardo, right?
So to clarify, are we saying that for the good starter use cases for the first KEP that Ricardo was mentioning, we're saying that we're doing port ranges, namespace by name, cluster scope policy, and node selector?
Oops.
Are we all on the same page on that?
I think so.
Click too fast.
So someone else have other ideas about what we can start hacking?
Does everybody agree that none of those are totally crazy things to write as KEPs? Because we all know that the KEPs are going to be a little controversial. So, but at least.
No, I think this is a great start.
Okay.
I think you're right on.
All right. Okay. So amongst friends, we agree we may be able to pull at least some of these off. And
now, did you update this issue 30 and add the two others that Andrew mentioned? This running list here. If you could just add a comment to this issue so we don't lose track of those, Andrew.
Yeah, let me add the namespaces when I was going to add that in. Thanks for bringing that up, Andrew, because we were debating that and we were like, no, let's leave it out. But I'm glad somebody brought it up. It's funny because Eric Bannon from StackRocks reached out to me today and he said a customer was just yelling at him that he wasn't able to do this.
Yeah, I think we also want to remove cider as slices and add in cluster network policy based on what we discussed today.
Yeah, let me do that. So, let's do that. And is that an actionable thing as a starter KEP? Is that? Seems like kind of broad.
It's fine right now. What we'll do is we'll set up a actual prioritized list of those KEPs, right? Like right now we're just kind of tracking them all. Then we'll say here's the ones that we're working on in this first phase. And
I feel like that sort of flows more into Abhishek's doc thing, but okay, whatever.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, I guess we're at 5:03, Cody. Let's let these innocent people go back to their lives, right?
Yep. Sounds good. Let's go ahead and wrap the meeting, and we'll see you next week.
All right, yeah. We'll triage some tomorrow. If anyone wants to reach out to do it with us, let us know. But we'll clean these issues up tomorrow so we're tracking very clear issues for the next meeting.
Great. I'll touch base with you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Thanks.